Hey guys, Conspiracy Todd here again, with more proof that the moon landings were fake, the 1969 moon landings. Today we're going to talk about the current Artemis program, and the main points I'm going to talk about is why did it take only 3 days for the Apollo astronauts to reach the moon, and it takes the Artemis spacecraft 5 or 6 days to reach the moon. Also, it took 3 days to get uh, back in 1969 through 72. But the Artemis program is going to take 5 or 6 days to get back to Earth. They're traveling the same distance. They're going to be traveling the same speed when they hit Earth. So let's talk about it in detail here. Okay, the question was how long does it take to get to the moon? And this is sciencehowstuffworks.com. And it says right here historically, most missions have taken about 3 days to reach the moon, assuming the moon is at an ideal distance. And right here it says the Apollo 11 mission. It took the Apollo 11 astronauts 3 days, 3 hours, and 49 minutes to reach the moon, and they returned in 2 days, 22 hours, and 56 minutes. Okay, let's look at this little article from the European Space Agency. European Space Agency, right here at the bottom. Up here, you can read the whole thing if you want, but I'm just interested in these parts right here. Throughout the 5 day trip to the moon, the European Service Module, let's just talk about what's going on here. Okay, this is the Orion space capsule right here. And this from here back is the European Service Module. And these little clamps here, I guess, are holding it on. And there's probably also an airlock so they can go between the two. But this is just like what they did back in the 60s. This is, the Apollo capsule. And then you had the command service module back here. It takes 5 days to get to the moon using that contraption, whereas 50 years ago, it only took 3 days. And also, it's going to take 5 or 6 days to get back. Here, let's look at their little time schedule here. Day one, day six, right here, is when they have a 149.65 second burn. This is putting the Orion space capsule in orbit around the moon. And then at day 20 is when they're going to do another long burn to get them out of orbit around the moon. And the splashdown is going to be 6 days later. So why does it take 5 or 6 days, 6 days, to get back? This diagram right here, this illustration, explains why all this doesn't make any sense. Okay, when you blast off to the moon, you have to go about 24,000 miles per hour to get far enough away from the Earth to be where the moon would be. And if the moon just happens to be there, whenever you get there, you can start orbiting the moon. But let's say if the moon wasn't there, you would just slowly fall back down to Earth. And then when you hit Earth, you'd be going about 24,000 miles an hour again. Okay, and this right here shows you how they just fall back down to Earth. So they start out at 0 and they reach 24,000 miles an hour here. When you're going to the moon, you start out at 24,000 miles an hour and you basically reach 0, or pretty much. But if the moon is there, you can start orbiting the moon, which is exactly what they did here, or is what they're illustrating Artemis did. And is what they're saying that the Apollo program did way back when, back in 1969. Okay, so this is a really good illustration of that. And if you don't believe me, you can believe this guy right here at Sky News, and he's using NASA source here. Let's listen to what he says.
Roughly 2 weeks later, Orion will head home, barreling into the atmosphere at almost 25,000 miles an hour.
Okay, so he's saying the capsule, when it comes back from the moon and reaches the Earth, it'll be going 25,000 miles an hour. So let's ask Google, how fast did the Apollo capsule hit the Earth's atmosphere? The Apollo 11 crew module, or the flight crew, returned from the historic moon expedition on 1969. Their command module pierced the Earth's atmosphere at 36,237 feet per second, which, if you convert that from feet per second to miles per hour, is 24,707 miles per hour. So roughly 24, 25,000 miles an hour when you hit the Earth's atmosphere. So let's go back to this diagram again. So basically, you're leaving Earth at 24, 25,000 miles an hour. You'll be hitting zero right here, and you come back. So whenever they want to leave the moon, basically they're circling the moon, and they can just fire their rockets at the right time to go away from the moon, and then basically it just cancels out their speed, and then they just fall back to Earth like a rock. Now the same thing, if you put a rock out here in space at this point and let it fall back to the Earth, it would be going about 24, 25,000 miles an hour when it hit the Earth's atmosphere. Starting out at zero, going to 25,000 miles or 24,000 miles, and the opposite happens. This is just physics. All right, and it takes a certain amount of time to do that. And I guess back in the 60s, it took 3 days to do that. And now, here in the 2022, it takes 5 or 6 days to do the same thing. That's what Artemis is saying. It takes that long. But I guess maybe there was a whole lot less gravity back in the 60s. I'm being sarcastic, but it just doesn't make any sense that back in the 60s, they did this in 3 days to get to the moon, 3 days to get back from the moon. But now, 2022, it takes 5 or 6 days to get to the moon and 5 or 6 days to get back from the moon. Gravity doesn't change, I don't think. Now, if this were less gravity, it would take longer, but I think the Earth has the same gravity it had back in the 60s. But anyway, guys, what do y'all think? Why did it take 3 days to get to the moon in 1969 and 3 days, actually a little bit less than 3 days, to get back from the moon? You're just falling back to Earth. And back here, and now in 2022, it takes 5 days to get to the moon and 5 or 6 days to get back from the moon. What's going on here? Why are we going backwards in technology? Now, anyway, guys, what do y'all think? Why did it take 3 days roughly to get to the moon and 3 days roughly to get back from the moon in the late 1960s, early 70s, and the 7 missions that supposedly went to the moon? How were they able to do it in 3 days? And today, with better technology, better rockets, and everything's supposed to be better technology, 53 years of better technology, it takes 5 and 6 days to do the same thing. Why are we going backwards in technology? The reason? Because they didn't do it back then, and I can't believe that actually they screwed up on the calculations of how long it would take to get to the moon and back. You would think they would have got that right. But I guess they got it wrong. And unless you think that Orion is, unless you think that the Artemis program is fake, which I don't. I think they're actually doing it this time. But so that it really takes 5 days to get to the moon. Also, something else I want to talk about, there's no live camera feed from the Artemis program. There's no live camera. You would expect 4K cameras all over that thing, transmitting 24 hours a day, continuous live coverage of it to everybody's living room. Because back in 1969, they had live TV coverage. It wasn't continuous, but they had it at certain times when they were orbiting the moon. There was live television coverage. They transmitted it to the entire world. It was all fake, but and now, 53 years later, they can't provide live feed camera footage of what they're doing around the moon. Come on, guys. It doesn't make sense. 53 years later, 53 years better technology. They had analog. They sent the signals were analog back then. Now we have digital. Anyway, it's just nuts with all the satellites. They didn't hardly have many satellites in orbit back then. We have all these satellites that transmit the signals. It just doesn't make sense. Come on, guys. The time difference and go into the moon and back. And then also they don't even have live coverage, or you don't have a live feed of the cameras on the. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, please. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.